Welcome! Today we're going to learn how to make the knit stitch. These videos are a supplement to my beginning knitting classes, and if you would like to request a video or you have questions or comments, please subscribe. Let me know. Your opinions are very important to me and help me develop better content for you. Okay, let's get started. In a previous video I taught you how to cast on using the long tail cast on method, and I have 10 stitches which we cast on here. I have my yarn that I'm going to be working with, the yarn attached to the ball oriented towards the back, and the little tail that got left over from the cast on oriented towards the front. And I'm going to be holding this tail with the left needle in my hand, just to keep it out of the way, because I don't want to accidentally start making my knit stitches with this little tail. Okay. When you hold your needles, I like to hold the needles with my hands on top of the needles. Some people hold the right needle like a pencil and make their stitches this way. If you find this comfortable, go ahead and do that. I, however, find it more comfortable and easier to control the stitches with both my hands on top of each needle. The needle tip with the stitches, the neutral stitches, the ones waiting to be worked into, will go into your left hand, and the empty needle tip, the working needle, will go into your right hand. It doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed. This is how you're going to, this is the place where you're going to put each of these needles. When you've got a needle tip with stitches on it, it goes in your left hand. When you've got an empty needle tip, it goes in your right hand. Okay, when you tension the yarn, you're either going to carry it in your left hand or in your right hand. In some parts of the world, some knitting styles, they don't carry the yarn in either hand. They wrap it around their neck and tension it that way. We're not going to cover that method. Not in this video anyways. For now, I don't want you to worry too much about how to tension the yarn or how to carry the yarn. What I want you to focus on is actually what's happening when you're making the stitches. And notice if you find that you have a tendency to reach for the yarn with your right hand or to reach with the yarn with your left hand. And I'm going to be intermittently switching so that you can see what it looks like with either hand. And just pay attention to what your body has a tendency to do, and do that. Don't fight your natural tendencies, because then what will happen is that there will be an additional level of difficulty added onto this, or stress, however you want to describe that feeling of it, just awkwardness. So for now, just leave the yarn hanging towards the back. Eventually, when you do begin tensioning the yarn, and I will show you how to wrap the yarn around your hand, if you're going to be carrying it in your left hand, you'll wrap around your pinky, under your ring finger, your middle finger, and over the top of your index finger. Then the needle will go in your left hand, and it'll rest between your middle finger and your thumb. If you're going to tension the yarn with your right hand, it's similar. You'll wrap around your pinky, under your ring finger, middle finger, over your index finger, and you'll hold the needle in your right hand. I tend to, when I knit this way, I tend to hold my index finger pointed out. Some people don't, they keep their finger down. Whatever your body ends up doing is okay. Everybody has their own unique way of knitting, and there's no wrong way to do this. If you end up with the fabric that you're satisfied with, it's what you're after. And just disregard anybody that tells you that you're knitting wrong. There's no wrong way to knit. There are just different ways to knit. So I'm going to leave the yarn hanging down for now. Okay, what you're going to do with your empty needle tip is you will go into, see these little beads from the cast on here? You're going to be looking for those. Here's the little bead from the cast on. And I'm going to go into the front of the stitch. What I mean by the front of the stitch is directly to the left of the stitch. So I'm going to push my right needle tip in through the stitch on the left needle. The right needle tip ends up behind the left needle. I'm going to use my right hand in this case to illustrate what I'm going to be doing. So the yarn is behind. The yarn is behind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the yarn over the top. Over the top. So I'm behind and I'm wrapping over the top, and I'm coming from left to right. So I'm on the left side of the needle and I'm going over the top. Do that again. I'm behind, coming over to the left and over the top. Okay. I'm just going to hold this strand so that it doesn't fall off, and I'm going to bring my right needle tip down. Here's the wrap I made. It's here. Okay, and I'm scooping my right needle tip here underneath the strand, this strand here that's on the left needle. I'm catching the wrap. I've got the wrap pulled through now, and what I can do now is just slide this old loop, this one, off the left needle tip. Now I've got one stitch on my right needle and more stitches ready to work on my left needle. So I'll do that again. Now sometimes the yarn will look like you can grab it from in front, especially if you're releasing the right needle tip to pick up the yarn. Don't pick it up from the front like this. That will create extra wraps that are going to give you a problem later. Keep the yarn to the back, and see how the yarn is attached now to the last stitch you made. It's attached here. Okay, so just keep it to the back. We're going to go in, we're going to look for that little bar. Here it is, and we're going to go into the front of the stitch on the left needle. We're pushing back. We're taking the yarn. I'm going to hold the right needle tip just to keep it oriented. Okay, wrapping towards the left and over the top, and then bringing the right needle tip down, making sure we don't drop our wrap, and scooping the right needle tip underneath the strand on the left needle and off. Okay, one more time. Going into the front, keeping the yarn to the back, into the front of the stitch on the left needle tip, from behind and over the top, left to right, sliding the right needle down. We're holding on to the yarn so that it doesn't fall off, and then taking the right needle tip and going underneath the strand that's on the left needle tip, and once we're through, sliding the needle, the old stitch off the left needle. Okay, if you find yourself reaching with your left hand, okay, the yarn's still here oriented, attached to the last stitch we made, go into the stitch through the front. Okay, I reach over with the left hand and then go over the top, and it's the same motion. Once you've gone over the top, you're going to slide your right needle tip down and underneath the strand on the left needle and slide the stitch off. Let me do that again. Go into the front of the stitch, over the top of the right needle, slide the needle tip down and underneath the strand on the left needle, and slide the old stitch off the left needle tip. Again, go into the front of the stitch on the left needle, grab the yarn from underneath and behind, wrap over the top of the right needle, and in this case you see I'm using my right index finger to hold the wrap, and then bring your right needle tip down and underneath the strand on the left needle. I like to push my right needle tip back up so that it's on top of the left needle. This just secures the new stitch that I made while I slide the old stitch off. I don't want to make these stitches and then keep everything too close to the tip of the needle, because what can happen is if you're too close to the tip, like this, what can happen is the wrap can fall off. Like, you know, that will make it awkward. So just go in, wrap, slide under, and then slide back up again just to secure this new stitch so it doesn't fall off when you slide the old stitch off the left needle. Okay, go in, reach, wrap over, slide under and off. Go in, okay, do that again. Go in, wrap, slide under, slip off. Go in, wrap over, slide under, slip off. Okay, when you finished your first row, what you will do is you will have your right needle tip full of stitches and your left needle tip empty. So what you'll do is you'll just transfer your right needle tip into your left hand and your empty needle tip into your right hand. Now you're back into the same position you were in before, where you have the neutral stitches waiting to be worked into in your left hand, and an empty working needle in your right hand. And you'll do the same thing, you'll start all over again. So here we are at the beginning of the row, and you've got this loose stitch here, really loose stitch here. That's normal, don't worry about that. Actually, in the beginning you want to look for it because it tells you where your front of your next stitch to work in. You look for this bar, it's going to be right up here. Now one of the things to look out for is sometimes the yarn wants to do this. See how now it looks like you have two stitches here? These are not two stitches. This is one stitch that's been pulled over. This is very common. It wants to do this. If you see this, take your yarn, pull it down and to the back, because what you want to see is a loop on your needle with the bar going across the bottom. Okay, when you see this, you will go into the front of your stitch that's directly above this bar and right to the left. Okay, and you're going to do the same thing you were doing before. Take your yarn from behind over to the left and over the top. Slide your needle tip down underneath the strand on the left needle and slide your new stitch off. Again, right above the bar into the front of the stitch. Here my stitch is attached. My yarn's attached to the last stitch I made. So I'll wrap under and over. Bring the needle tip down and slide it underneath the strand on the left needle and slide the old stitch off the left needle. Okay, if you're carrying the yarn with the left, into the stitch, over the top, slide under the old stitch and off. Into the stitch, over the top, slide the right needle tip underneath the strand on the left needle and slide the old stitch off. Again, go into the stitch, take your yarn underneath, over the top, slide the right needle tip down underneath the strand on the left needle and slide the old stitch off. Eventually, after you get a little bit of practice, you will begin holding the yarn in your hand so that you're not making very many movements, whether you're holding the yarn with your right hand or your left hand. Although when you're holding the yarn with your right hand, you do make a little bit more motion than when you're holding the yarn with the left hand. But for now, just focus on which hand is reaching to do what, and focus on seeing how the yarn is being pulled through the previous loops, the neutral loops, in order to make your new row of stitches. And eventually this will become very fluid, and you will develop your own way of making the stitches, whether you're carrying the yarn in your right hand or left hand. The objective is to end up with a fabric that you like and a process you enjoy, and it doesn't matter how you hold the yarn, as long as you're happy with the end results. Okay, in the next video we will talk about how to make a purl stitch. But for now, just keep practicing your knit stitch, making this fabric, which is this fabric that you're making, the resulting fabric when you're knitting every row, as I'm having you do, is called garter stitch. And it's a very pretty fabric. You can go ahead and practice this until it feels comfortable. It's a good idea to practice on a small little piece until it feels comfortable. I've tried to demonstrate a few ways of holding the yarn. And again, just be aware of what your body wants to do, and don't fight with it. Go with the flow, and you'll end up a much happier knitter. And here's my little bit of garter stitch where I have smooth and a ridge and a smooth and a ridge. Okay, I will see you in the next video. We'll learn how to make the purl stitch. Thanks.